You keep replaying the ending in your head because it doesn't make sense. How can someone hold you, laugh with you, memorize your smallest moods, and then go cold, like none of it ever happened? How can someone say they need space with a voice that sounds almost relieved, while you're left carrying the weight of the whole collapse in your chest? And maybe the part that hurts most is not even the breakup, it's the silence after. The eerie stillness, the missing emotion, the unbearable possibility that while you are shattered, they are fine. But that is the lie your pain keeps whispering to you. Not because your pain is stupid, because pain is protective. And when the heart cannot find clarity, it creates the cruelest answer available. They never cared. They moved on. You meant less than you thought. But that is not always the truth. And if you are dealing with an avoidant after a breakup, the truth is often darker, stranger, and far more complicated than your mind has been able to hold. Because avoidants do not always show pain the way other people do. They often bury it so deep that even they cannot recognize it as pain anymore. What looks like distance is often dysregulation. What looks like indifference is often overwhelm. What looks like freedom is sometimes a nervous system fighting for air. That is the brutal truth. And here is the part that may sting. The more you chased clarity, the safer they felt disappearing. The more you begged for honesty, the more their body translated intimacy into pressure. Not because you were too much, because closeness, when it touches old wounds in an avoidant person, does not always register as love first. Sometimes it registers as danger. Not physical danger, emotional invasion, loss of control, exposure, need, dependency. And those things can wake up a very old fear, a fear they usually do not have words for. So no, they did not necessarily stop caring. Many of them felt too much and shut down. That is the hidden pain nobody talks about. Avoidant people are often misunderstood as people who feel less. But many of them do not feel less. They feel in a way that becomes unmanageable. Their system learned long ago that emotions are not a place to rest, they are a place to drown. So when love gets deep enough to matter, the body starts preparing for impact. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes more sensitive to threat. The nervous system starts reading closeness as something that could trap, expose, or consume them. Cortisol rises, stress builds, the body stays alert. And even though part of them wants connection, another part is already reaching for the exit. That is why the breakup can look so calm from the outside. You see someone who detached quickly, someone who threw themselves into work, someone who posted normally, someone who acted practical, someone who turned your shared history into a short sentence. I just need to focus on myself. But what you did not see was the internal split. The part of them that felt relief, and the part of them that quietly started grieving in a language they do not speak well. Avoidants are masters of functional heartbreak. They can answer emails with a heavy chest. They can laugh while emotionally disappearing. They can convince themselves they're just tired, just busy, just not that emotional, just over it. But bodies do not lie forever, and grief does not vanish just because it is hidden. It changes form. It becomes numbness, irritability, restlessness, insomnia, compulsive distractions, random flashes of memory that hit when the room is finally quiet. It shows up at 11:47 p.m. when they reach for their phone and remember there is no one to text. It shows up when they pass a place that still has your nervous system printed all over it. It shows up when something good happens and they realize the person they wanted to tell is now the person they are avoiding in their own mind. This is where people get it wrong. They think avoidants enjoy the distance. Sometimes, at first, they do feel relief. Relief from pressure. Relief from emotional intensity. Relief from expectations they did not know how to meet. But relief is not the same thing as peace. Relief is what the body feels when it escapes overwhelm. Peace is what the soul feels when it is truly free. Those are not the same. And for many avoidants, relief fades. Then the real pain begins. Because once the pressure is gone, the absence remains. And absence is a quiet predator. It does not knock, it settles. It enters in the spaces where distraction fails, in the drive home, in the Sunday afternoon, in the bed that suddenly feels too large, in the moment they realize nobody is reaching for them anymore. That is when the mind begins its tricks. Maybe it wasn't that serious. Maybe they were too needy. Maybe I made the right decision. Maybe I just need more time. This is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is psychological self-protection. Avoidant attachment often relies on deactivating strategies, ways of thinking that reduce emotional closeness so the person can feel safe again. They minimize what they felt. They focus on your flaws. They romanticize independence. They tell themselves they are better alone. Suppression becomes the emergency exit. But suppression is expensive. Very expensive. Because what you suppress does not disappear. It waits. And here is the core concept most people never understand deeply enough. Silence. Silence is not empty for an avoidant. Silence is where everything they ran from gets louder. When you were still calling, texting, trying to explain, trying to fix it, part of their system stayed mobilized against contact. Even if they missed you, your presence still activated the part of them that associated intimacy with demand. But when you finally stop, when you stop explaining, when you stop reaching, when you stop proving your love to someone committed to misunderstanding it, the dynamic changes. Not because you are playing a game, because the stimulus is gone. And in that absence, the nervous system loses the thing it was defending against. That is when the breakup stops being theory and becomes sensation. That is when your silence enters the room. And suddenly, they do not have you to push against. They do not have your messages to mute. They do not have your emotion to label as pressure. All they have is themselves. And that is where many avoidants begin to feel the breakup for real. They start wondering if you're actually done. They check your page and hate themselves for it. They reread old messages with a strange ache behind the ribs. They tell themselves they're just curious. They think about reaching out, then don't. They imagine you with someone calmer, stronger, less available. They feel something sharp and immediate. Not always love, not always clarity, but loss. Real loss. And loss has a way of bypassing defenses, especially when dopamine is involved. Because attachment is not just emotional, it is chemical. When a bond breaks, the brain does not simply process sadness, it can also experience craving. Dopamine pathways involved in reward and motivation can make a person long for the very connection they pushed away, which is one reason breakups can feel obsessive and addictive. Social rejection can also activate brain regions associated with pain. So imagine the avoidant who swore they just needed freedom. At first, they breathe. No tension, no emotional confrontation, No need to answer hard questions, no mirror held up to their inconsistency. But then, life continues, and your absence does something their defenses were not prepared for. It removes the illusion that they were the one holding all the power. Because now, they cannot predict you. They cannot control your availability. They cannot assume your love is waiting in the exact same place they left it. And uncertainty is deeply activating. Suddenly, the person who once felt overwhelmed by your presence can become disturbed by your disappearance. This is the part nobody tells you. Avoidants often do not process connection fully while they are inside it. They process it after it is gone. After the door closes, after the stimulation drops, after their body stops fighting closeness long enough to feel what the closeness meant. So yes, sometimes they start missing you later. Sometimes they come back later. Sometimes they think about you far more than they ever admitted. Sometimes they obsess in private while looking completely composed in public. But listen carefully. This is not your invitation to wait at the door of someone's emotional paralysis. This is not your sign to become more patient with neglect. This is not proof that your suffering was romantic. And this is not a strategy to get them back. Because the moment you use silence as manipulation, you are still orbiting them. Still performing around their wounds. Still making your healing dependent on their reaction. That is the trap. A lot of people learn this psychology and then immediately ask, so if I disappear, will they chase me? Maybe. Maybe they will text. Maybe they will lurk. Maybe they will circle back when loneliness breaks through their defenses. Maybe they will feel the full weight of losing you and try to return. But if the pattern inside them has not changed, they do not come back as a new person. They come back as the same nervous system in a different mood. And that matters. Because the hidden pain avoidance never show after a breakup is real. But hidden pain does not automatically create emotional maturity. Pain can soften a person, or it can make them repeat themselves more carefully. So if they return, it means nothing by itself. Not until there is accountability. Not until there is language for what happened. Not until their self-awareness becomes stronger than their reflex to detach. Not until closeness stops feeling like a threat they punish you for. Otherwise, your reunion becomes another round of the same wound. More chemistry, more hope, more almost, more confusion dressed as depth. And you deserve more than almost. You deserve more than being loved only in retrospect. You deserve more than being deeply felt in private and poorly handled in real life. That is why your power begins the moment you stop trying to decode every silence as a test of your worth. Because their avoidance was never proof that you were hard to love. It was proof that intimacy touched something unresolved in them. Those are not the same. You have to understand this in your bones. Someone can care and still be harmful. Someone can miss you and still not be safe. Someone can feel pain and still choose patterns over growth. Do not confuse their hidden suffering with your responsibility. That is how people abandon themselves while calling it compassion. And maybe that is the deepest transformation here. Not learning how to get inside the avoidant mind. Learning how to leave it. Learning how to stop building your life around the emotional availability of someone who only understands your value in your absence. That is not power. That is starvation. Real power is quieter. It is the moment you stop needing proof that you mattered. It is the moment you stop checking whether their silence means regret. It is the moment you realize that your nervous system deserves peace more than your ego deserves closure. And something extraordinary happens when you reach that point. You stop chasing people who are only brave enough to love you when you're gone. You stop auditioning your softness for those who confuse intimacy with pressure. You stop shrinking your needs to fit inside someone else's fear. You become unavailable to emotional scarcity. And that changes everything. Because the energy shifts when a person who once begged to be chosen finally chooses themselves. Your voice changes. Your posture changes. Your standards change. The grief is still there, yes, but it no longer humiliates you. It purifies you. You no longer love from hunger. You love from self-respect. And that is the identity shift the breakup was secretly trying to give you. Not just acceptance, authority. Not just healing, discernment. Not just moving on, returning to yourself so completely that anybody who wants access to you must arrive with clarity, consistency, and emotional courage. So if an avoidant broke your heart and left you haunted by the silence, hear this carefully. Their silence was never the final verdict on your worth. It was the sound of their own internal conflict, their own overwhelmed nervous system, their own unprocessed fear. Let them have it. Let them sit with what they ran from. Let them feel the weight of an absence they once thought they wanted. And you stop standing in the doorway of someone else's confusion. You become the one person who does not leave you. You become the safe place. You become the closure. You become the standard.
And one day, whether they come back or not, whether they miss you loudly or silently, whether they finally understand your value or spend years running from it, it will no longer decide the way you see yourself. Because by then, you will have remembered something they could never give you in the first place. Your worth was never in their ability to stay. It was in your ability to stop abandoning yourself just because someone else did.